Hey, it's Angela.
This is Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Sanjana, and this is Earthlistening. We are here with Andrew and Juntao from Spring Sprouts. They are a group of students who are dedicated to adding the how and why of learning in rural China. They make blogs and do projects to better the lives of students in rural China.
Okay, so welcome, guys. So can you introduce yourselves a bit?
Sure. I'm Juntao. I'm one of the people from Spring Sprouts,
And I'm Andrew. I'm also a part of Spring Sprouts.
and we mainly focus on education in rural China and kind of straying away a little from the traditional methods and trying to add our own culture into it and our own.
So what does Spring Sprouts do? Like what events or what activities do you guys do?
So for the past 5 years, since 2015, Spring Sprouts has mainly focused on education in villages of China. Essentially due to the fact that there's like low funding and poor teacher qualifications, a lot of the students there don't have access to quality education that really motivates them to progress further. Added to the fact that there's, poor sanitary conditions, poor nutrition, and parents who have to leave to the cities to find better jobs, a lot of the students are not developed enough, both cognitively, mentally, and emotionally from an early stage, such that they don't really find much interest in learning and are demotivated early. So our goal is to add our own experiences to education and take that back to the village in rural China. So for the past 5 years, we've mainly been working in my hometown or my dad's native village, which is located in Henan, China. And we mainly recruit people from, all around the world to try to give them that positive cultural shock and reinvigorate their passion for learning.
Oh, okay.
What has inspired you guys to start this? Something that has kind of pushed you or like motivated you to create Spring Sprouts?
I think it started off a little earlier than 2015. So after third grade, I went to my father's native village for the first time, actually, and I sat in one of their classrooms where the teacher was going up at the board and giving lessons. So I think that's kind of where it started. To me, it was like a cultural shock. I wasn't like used to that type of teaching method where students would have to memorize a poem in a class period and then give a presentation of it at the end of class. So I think what initially inspired me was just that curiosity in their education. So as I returned and when I was older, I decided to first understand their side of education and what they are used to. And after learning a little more about that, I felt that there was such a drastic difference between how they grew up learning and how me personally growing up in the Silicon Valley grew up learning. So I decided to initially use my advantage in English since I was a native speaker and to start there and provide essentially more teamwork and creativity and encourage students to be more informal in the classroom so that they feel more comfortable with learning. So I think that was the earliest inspiration.
Oh, wow.
It's a really cool experience.
Yeah. So were there like any challenges that you came across through Spring Sprouts?
Yeah, I feel like there's three main challenges, and I don't want to say the one's more important because that would discredit the other two.
Mm-hmm.
The three ones are hygiene, fundraising, and getting credibility back home in the US. So for hygiene, you would imagine that in a rural village, in a rural neighborhood in China, it's not very clean. And that's exactly what it was. The classroom that we used, it was pretty dirty, and also the food wasn't fresh. The biggest problem that we faced was when our teachers and when we first got to the village and we were eating the food there, we would get stomach problems, and basically that would just knock us out for like 2 to 3 days. And that would lead to some classrooms being underfilled by teachers because one of them is lying on the bed barely even moving. And that was like a major problem that we faced when we first started. But we started moving around those problems by like buying food from restaurants that were a little more fresh. And we also brought plenty of medicine. So
Mm.
that's like mainly the hygiene problems. And for fundraising, we obviously could have asked our parents to give us the money to do it because we're all like middle class people living in the Silicon Valley. But part of the experience of running an organization like this is fundraising and getting money from like a GoFundMe. So that was our major challenge because the classrooms are under equipped. They didn't have like the stuff that you see in a classroom in the US. So we had to get the chairs, the desks, everything set up with like a Wi-Fi router, projector, pencils, erasers, the stuff that the students didn't have when they first came. And our third major challenge was getting credibility back home because part of fundraising is you need to have people who trust you. And we're just a small organization that nobody has ever heard of. Spring Sprouts, like that's not a household name. And we had to convince people, and I'll go into detail later about how we did that, but we had to get credibility in the US in order to get parents and other people to just donate to the cause.
Mm.
Yeah, when you said something about hygiene and like stomach problems, I remember like a time when I went to India, and you have street food outside, and obviously the immune system of a human being in like Asia is a lot more stronger compared to here, where there's health regulations and things like that. So like I have a couple of friends who like have relatives who are doctors, and when she used to have street food, her parents would literally stop at the side of the road and like let her throw up and pretend like nothing ever happened because it was so normal to have stomach issues there and to have like to like overall get like health issues, but like those health issues weren't life threatening because it only affected people from like people out of Asia or that whole area.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like you're going to die, but it is a pretty big concern when you're trying to like teach students for an entire day.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Are there any like upcoming ideas and events you guys have in store for Spring Sprouts?
So currently, we're just planning on continuing to write blogs and recruiting people. And that was what I was talking about, getting credibility. One of the ways that we do this is by having a social media presence on Instagram. We also have a website, springsprouts.org, and we write blogs on the website. We write about like health issues, water issues, educational issues around the world, and poverty in general. And that's basically a way we can communicate to people who are living here. We also translate it to Chinese in case anyone in China reads this and wants to support the cause. So that's one way we get our credibility here. And recruiting is obviously important because we're planning on expanding in the future. I'll go more into that later. And we can't do it with just like a team of 5. We need a lot more people to do it.
Just curious. Originally, when you started, like, how small was your team, like, initially? And, like, how big is it now compared to when, like, you just began?
When it first started, so it was just my dad who took me and my sister,
Oh.
and my great uncle. So my grandpa's younger brother was the retired principal of the local elementary school. So he kind of had like the credibility that Andrew was talking about in the village, in terms of like teaching credentials, fame, I guess, in some ways, or popularity. So he kind of started like the summer education program. And then we joined in the first year just as like an experiment, to teach English, like I previously mentioned. And then from there, we had people like Andrew, and friends from China, like my dad's, high school friends, sons or daughters join us. And it started off pretty small. Usually it was like just their kids that came, and the parents were busy during the summer. So I guess year by year, we grew like more each year. Right now, we have about, I think, 32 or 33 members with us. But again, they're like located some in Canada. We have like one in Europe, and then some in Taiwan and China mainland. So for all of them to work on like the same project at the same time is a little hard, but they have their like own niche that they expand on in their own region.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
It sounds like you guys are really influential and impact like
Mhm.
across the world, I would say. What do you plan for the future of Spring Sprouts? Because I'm noticing that you guys are putting a lot of effort and you're trying to grow your not legacy, kind of your kind of way of improving rural China and things like that. So what is your future plans?
Yeah, so here at Spring Sprouts, our biggest goal is obviously the biggest positive societal influence. And the way we can expand our influence is by expanding our areas of operation. Obviously, right now we only operate in Henan, but we are planning on expanding to Hunan because I've actually reached out to someone who lives there, and we have connections with students in China who are from many different places. But I believe that next year we should be able to expand into Hunan because I have like organized logistics and stuff. We were supposed to do it this year, but obviously we couldn't go back. So
Yeah.
I think in the future, it's just expanding to different villages and different provinces around China, not just sticking to one, because we can obviously just stick to one, but the biggest impact, the largest impact would be found in expanding to other places.
Mm.
So you say expanding to other places, but have you ever like considered maybe like is it just restricted to China? Or are you guys gonna expand to like other places like Russia or like India or Japan or Korea and things like that?
While we haven't considered that now, we are open and looking forward to expanding to other places in the future. If we get a bigger team, more people who have different backgrounds, because we don't have anyone that speaks Japanese or like Russian or those
Mm.
languages. We only have people who speak Chinese right now.
So how did COVID-19 affect any of your project that you guys are doing?
It obviously affected our operations greatly because Spring Sprouts, the idea, it just requires us to go back to the village every summer. And we obviously couldn't do that because of the travel ban. And also if you go to China, you have to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks by yourself to isolate. So we were unable to go back to China. And also we usually hold meetings in person. Either Juntao or I will prepare slides and like project them and talk to our members basically just before we go back. Obviously couldn't do that. All of our meetings had to be over Zoom and all of our communications had to be over Slack, which I feel like is a good thing because it's modernizing our operations. And I was also planning on making a promotional video this year. We have a lot of footage, but it's mostly just still pictures or like videos of us teaching. I wanted to like do drone shots of the village and the surroundings just so people could get an idea of like the circumstances we were dealing with. And it couldn't be done this year, but we have recruited people who do video editing and picture editing. So next year, next summer, we can start on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. With Earthlinking, we had a lot of things put on hold because of COVID. Like we
Yeah.
started to grow during this COVID time, but we had a lot of like plans and things like that. And then as soon as like COVID hit us, we had to like push all that stuff back, and you don't know how far you have to push it back. So it just became a larger issue.
Yeah. It's like there's pros and cons. COVID limits what we can do, but at the same time it gives us much more time to do it. So I'm actually curious that because you guys have the background of being Asian American, being Chinese, so growing up in America and then going back to rural China, was there like one like striking difference that you immediately noticed? Like besides like the poor conditions, but like anything about like how they acted in rural China or just anything that was noticeable to you guys?
Yeah, I feel like the biggest difference between rural China and here is like the eagerness of the students to learn. Because I've done like tutoring and like teaching kids here as well
Mhm.
before I started doing the Spring Sprout stuff. But the students here, I mean, their parents are like paying for it. They're only there because their parents force them to do it. But in rural China in the village, The students, they run to class every morning. They're very eager to learn. They're always sitting at the edge of their seats, like looking up at me with their eyes sparkling. It's very inspirational. And I mean, it's very different from what we have here. I feel like a lot of students here take what they have for granted and the education opportunities they have for granted. All the students there know that us, the Asian American students, going back to the village is a very unique and once in a lifetime opportunity for them to expand their knowledge. So they take it very eagerly. And I've even heard the students, they bike or walk from villages that are 10 miles away just to come to our classes. And that's like the most inspirational thing.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Like, especially during living in America, like, there's a saying I've heard before where students can't learn if they don't want to learn. Like, you could teach them all you want, but if they don't have the mindset to learn, then they're not going to take in anything. And like, really, what you said was really inspiring. How like the kids, they don't have that much resources or luxury as we do, and yet they would be dedicated to walk that much, to stay in classrooms that have like not such good conditions or no air conditioning, and just stay there for the like pure sake of learning, which is really inspiring.
Yeah, I agree. Like, the whole thing with not having education back there is you don't see that here because here is kind of like law to like go to school. So most children grow up with the thought that, oh, I hate school, or like, oh, like the first thought you get in the morning is, oh, I hate school because you have to wake up. Because that's one of the first things you think about. That's your first instinct about school every morning. So that tends to like influence our opinion on how we see school. But when you have school taken away from you, you realize the importance of it. Like, I'm pretty sure most of us here, actually, I don't know most of us, I don't know if I would agree, but it's just like the thought that some of us may miss school because school also may not come with the education portion, but it may come with the whole socialization factor. So having that, something like that is take it for granted here, but it's not the same in China, as you guys explained.
And then also, like, to add on, I think that COVID-19 has definitely put like a big impact on like definitely our school, because now that we have moved on to virtual online learning, like for me, I actually miss going to school and having like these thoughts of like not going to school. I feel that I've been taking that for granted. And then even now, like in China, like like with the COVID-19 happening, maybe those students, like they have no like, I guess, no form of like education, because like you said, like there's not a lot of technology there.
I completely agree, Caitlin. So during this whole pandemic situation, we've mentioned that, a lot of new ideas have been coming. What are some things you would do differently? Like, you've gone through many experiences through Spring Sprouts, and you've probably had things that you wish you didn't do, or probably things you wish you had do. So if there's anything you could change, what would you do if you could change anything of the past?
I think one of the hardest things to balance uh, is expanding. So I think like especially when we recruit more people during this COVID-19 time, with everything being online, it's hard to initially, especially for smaller organizations, it's very exciting for the initial publicity, and have recruits or like applications, but especially without that face-to-face contact and without like actual relationships with the person like we've had previously in the village, like living with each other for 20 days, sleeping on the floor together, teaching classes together. Without that type of interaction, it's very easy to get ahead of yourself and expand larger than you're able to contain. So a lot of the times, like when you expand, at least in my opinion, I think that expanding beyond just the members that you're used to, like having interviews for new members, reviewing applications, etc. I think that a lot of the times you're putting the control in the other person's hand, especially for nonprofit organizations like ours. In my opinion, during the first few like weeks of COVID-19 and during our recruiting session, like it was very easy for Andrew, or at least for me, for us to get ahead of ourselves and like be overexcited about this person that's interested in joining, where a lot of the times like the expectations that we have for them kind of alleviates like our workload, but at the same time places that in the control of the other person's hands, and if they don't do it, it's more of a burden than for us to just do it. So I think like if I were to do something differently, if we were to do recruits again, I think I would definitely make sure to have more thorough interactions with the other person, especially in these cases where accountability is hard to be like kept track of. Like you can't even like ensure that they respond to your text. So in cases like this, I think like just holding back a little on like the initial excitement and giving it a couple days to cool off before making like a final decision.
So like during the pandemic, is there anything you guys are doing personally for fun? Because we have like, much more time, theoretically speaking. Because like I know for me personally, with school or like with like summer school, it doesn't feel like I have more time. But like theoretically, there's like more time. So anything interesting you guys are trying out or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like lockdown, shelter in place, it's a bad thing because you can't see your friends as often. But the good thing is you get to have a lot of time, not only for like self-reflection, but also like trying new things. For me, like I'm getting into day trading. That's something I never would have thought of doing without lockdown because I just would never had the time to do my research, and I would also have school. That's another thing. And also like I'm a part of other organizations and I run other organizations. So we've been doing a lot more expansion because of lockdown. We have a lot more time. Everyone's stuck at home. Like one of my organizations, the Valley Economist, we did most of our recruiting and our expansion during this period. And just like Spring Sprouts, we've taken advantage of this time to do our expansion.
So, with like Spring Sprouts, what is the easiest and hardest thing about starting up a organization?
I think that easiest is like the starting part. I guess it goes both ways, but I think starting by itself is one of the easier parts in my opinion, especially now like on Instagram as well. Like I'm sure you guys have noticed like after COVID hit, especially in the last 2 months, there's been a lot of youth-led organizations, student-led organizations that's sprouted up. So I think I'm not saying like not giving any commentary on any of them, but I think that definitely starting is one of the easier parts. Just it's just making an account on Instagram or just establishing like a Wix website and putting yourself out there. At the same time, I think that attracting like your first recruits is also not that difficult. It's not hard to make your quote unquote startup or nonprofit at its early stages compelling because there's a lot of potential and other people see a lot of room for personal opportunities if other people have ideas of which direction this organization should go. If it's like just like a 2-day old organization, it's in my opinion pretty easy to have people to hop on. But building off of that, I think the harder parts is finding a zone or a region where you specialize in and differentiate from other people. Like it's finding whether it's like something like what you guys are doing with like the podcast or something of the sorts where you differentiate your goals from other similar nonprofits. Because I think that with starting a nonprofit or an organization being the easiest parts, it's very common for interests to collide with each other. So I think the harder part, instead of trying to outdo someone in that specific sector, I think the harder part is to find something that you're interested in that's kind of like a little bit different from the exact or general overview, but then you dive specifically into that idea and you invest much more time in it and you differentiate yourself that way. So I think that's definitely harder because you have to convince people that your idea or your sector is compelling and has the same potential as this overarching idea. And at the same time, it, I think, requires a lot of like stepping out of your comfort zone and working on things that you don't know if it actually would, you know, work out the way you think it is. So it's like putting in the time that you don't know if you'll get the return on investment on. So in my opinion, I think that starting would be easy, but then actually developing would be harder.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just like having like the ideas down and having like members join it. I think that's like the easy part of having an organization, but definitely keeping that dedication, that passion going, and also like taking those actions. I think that's definitely the harder part in trying to grow as an organization. So I definitely agree.
So you guys are both seniors in high school. Would you guys be? Are you guys thinking of continuing like Spring Sprouts and being involved in it when you guys are off to college, or do you want to like slowly transfer it to the next set of high schoolers?
I think personally for me, this has been a question that like I've like contemplated a lot. So it's a pretty good question. Um, I don't think, I think it all depends on what we're able to do in the next year. If we're centered still, in my father's native village, then it's very hard to have strangers go to, my great uncle's house and have them sleep on the ground there and have stomach issues for 2 months or 2 weeks. So if that's the case, and if that's the stage that we're at, then it would be something that I would have to continue into college from our scope. But everything that we've been working on right now is especially utilizing COVID-19 and like everyone being at home and the huge like boom in like internet participation is to move everything online. So connecting with like people here, for example, like Stanford had a rural education action program that does a lot of research in these issues. So connecting with organizations here and at the same time with high schoolers in China that have do this year round. If we are able to have that platform, like Andy said, to spread to multiple villages where in a sense like those villages aren't exactly our home anymore, but it's more of the organization and our final goal that is, then we would hope to pass this down to like underclassmen and have them continue in high school, because I think that especially regardless of the motivation, a lot of people in high school have like very very good ideas, like better than mine, in all cases. So I think that definitely if we are able to have a much wider presence, then high school would be a environment that we would like to have some portion of our organization in.
Yeah, I would completely agree. Like, I would say not the newer generation, like the incoming high schoolers would have creative ideas because they're not sitting with the same like organization, or like they're not sitting with the same idea for a long period of time. They have like a new fresh mind coming in. So I've seen like the difference of like me just sitting down and like spending like 4 hours trying to think of something, and I come up with 2 ideas, and then like a high schooler just walks in and like suddenly comes up with like tens and thousands of ideas, and I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm just wasting my time.
Yeah, exactly.
So on the topic of like trying to also encourage younger people, just like incoming high schoolers, would you have any tips or advice for like younger people or just high schoolers who want to start up their own organization or like to start their own initiative?
Yeah, I feel like first thing you gotta consider when you're starting an organization is you gotta stay motivated. So like, don't say you're gonna do something and then not do it. You can say like, today I'm starting my podcast, or today I'm starting my tech company, but then 10 days later, you haven't started it and you're still saying, today I'm gonna start this company. It doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do. And the most important, the biggest, most effective way of motivating yourself is to find team members. And it's okay to recruit friends at first, but you don't want to be uncomfortable with going outside of your circle or community to find new members. And you need these team members when you're starting, because they're going to be the ones that motivate you and remind you that it's time to start, it's time to do something instead of just talking about doing something. The last part is setting time-sensitive goals, also known as SMART goals, which is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. You write these goals down, either you're like in a Google Doc or something, or a Google Sheet. You write these down goals, and then when the time comes, you have to make sure, did I actually do this, and how well did I do this? That's how you can like track your organization's growth and also like continue the growth.
Mm. I see. So like it's like looking, like especially focusing on finding the right people, finding the people that actually take this to heart, who have the drive and have the best interests for the organization at heart.
So is there anything you guys learned so far during your journey in Spring Sprouts and working with the children and like students in rural China?
Uh, from my perspective, I think that one of the biggest things that I've learned is, especially as like our team has expanded, to not care too much about like what other people think of you. I know this is like very cliche, but I think that it's definitely something that I've kind of struggled with earlier on. Uh, Especially like, if like Andy said, like a lot of the people were our friends that initially joined, but at the same time they're not the people that are going to hold you accountable, and they're not going to be the people that you can hold accountable. So as we got bigger and as we had to set those goals, I had to constantly tell myself and have like Andy remind me that those are the goals that we are working towards and not the people that we're working towards to please. So it's more of focusing on the students and the people that we're affecting instead of the people that help us get there. Although like, not to say that they aren't important, but if what they're doing doesn't align with our final goal for the organization, then there's no point in investing extra time and trying to cultivate those relationships, because at the end of the day, what we're doing with our organization is separate from like the friendships that we have. So
Yeah.
not being too friend oriented or like relationship oriented is something that I've like struggled with and learned from and continue to progress through. I think that it's it's like it's a hard balance to find, as with like a lot of things. Like trying to, because personally for me, I like to be nice to everyone, make jokes with everyone, and just, I think that people connections are extremely important, um, even in the organization itself. And if you have like the right connections, then they might give you the right opportunities. But at the same time, there's a certain point where you have to like, if a person is not in line with with your goal, or hindering you in your organization and affecting other people from reaching your goals, then there's like a certain point where you have to be more goal oriented than people oriented, I think.
Mm-hmm. Something I want to add upon the question that Caitlin said was, have you learned, not from the experience, but anything from those children? Like they value things differently. Some things that we take granted growing up in like America is something that they didn't have the opportunity to. So what have you learned personally from them? And yeah.
I think from the children, I think Andy, like Andrew mentioned this earlier, was their, eagerness to learn. So even though the conditions aren't good, and throughout the year, their, teaching quality really demotivates them, they know a good opportunity when they see it. And it's not saying that, we're highly qualified people, that's that quote unquote good opportunity, but it's saying that they realize the opportunity to experience new culture, and they're not afraid to try it out and to invest time and to actually experience it. And if it's not good, they don't have anything to lose. They can only gain from the experience. So that type of attitude is something that ironically or not, kind of applies to our organization as well, especially as we continue to expand online. To we don't our foundation is a single village or a single room in Henan, China. So there's honestly not much to lose, other than even if we can't expand online, we still have the 100 students that we're affecting. And there's always, it's not that like we're going to give up expanding online, it's that we don't have to be so invested in a single opportunity that doesn't work for us, but at the same time we don't have to think so much before diving into an opportunity that it prevents us from progressing forward. So I think that's something that, beyond just the students in the classroom, that we've been able to take from them and apply to our lives.
That's not, I wouldn't say interesting. That's a very good moral and valuing way of looking at it, rather than just kind of like saying the basic things like, oh, I learned to take things more granted. You kind of twisted it into your own perspective and made it personal to Spring Sprouts and the members in it.
Yeah, it adds on to a new, different perspective. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you guys so much for coming on with us and answering all these questions and having us to get to know you guys, your goals, how you guys all started better.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thanks for listening. Check us out on Instagram at Earthlinking2020. Check out our website on Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Earthlinking Team. Donate to our GoFundMe located in the description box of our first video.
This is Earthlistening. See you in the next episode.
Here are some bloopers. Enjoy.
I'm Sanjana, and this is Earthlistening.
Sanjana?
What? I said this is Earthlistening.
No. Read.
It's been a long time, that's all I gotta say.
Wait, can you introduce them?
What?
Okay, let's restart. I was blind. That's what I'm gonna say. Okay, Angela, can you stop the recording and restart?
Okay, fine. Ready whenever you are.
Wait, so I say this is Earthlistening and see you in the next episode?
Hmm?
Okay, I'm ready.
You're ready.
This is
I
Earth.
can't believe. Oh, sorry.